There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
Jessie Stevens here, jumping in briefly with something I thought you might like. If you're expecting, or a new mum, or wrangling a toddler, we've compiled all the best resources for new mums in a free newsletter. Sign up for free via the link in the show notes.
A few months ago, some of the friends in my group chats who don't have kids yet started talking about Kelly McCarren. Well, less talking about her and more sort of freaking out. I knew Kelly. We had met a few years ago after a Mamamia Out Loud live show. She came along with her best friend, Key Reese, and they had a couple of drinks and they came up to me afterwards to introduce themselves and they were hilarious. And within a year, they were both working at Mamamia. After a successful career in media and marketing, Kelly is the co-host of our You Beauty podcast. But that is not why my younger friends were talking about her. A few months ago, Kelly had a baby, a little boy called Lenny. And she began almost immediately posting very honestly about her days and nights with Lenny.
So while the nurse was watching me, he fell asleep. He smiled at me when I put him in the cot and put himself to bed. And ever since, he's woken up 6 times in an hour and a half.
And the young women were really shocked. They were like, wait, is this what having a baby is really like? Yeah, I told them. That is exactly what it's like, but not many people talk about it, let alone put it on Instagram. From Mamamia, you're listening to No Filter, a podcast where people speak candidly about their lives and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. And being candid and vulnerable is exactly what Kelly McCarren has been doing for years. It's why I thought she was so amazing the first time I met her. She has spoken candidly and publicly on her socials about her boob job, her nose job, hating her wedding, gender disappointment when she fell pregnant, her mental health, and now what being a new mother really looks and feels like, despite what you see on most people's Instagrams. So I asked her on No Filter to talk about the things that we don't often talk about, the moments in life where we don't think any other woman has ever been there before, and how Kelly is making so many women feel seen by sharing what's really going on in her life. Here's my chat with Kelly.
Kelly McCarren, when was the first time that you realised your mental health perhaps was going to throw some challenges up in your life?
Just in general? Or,
yeah,
okay,
just in terms that you even became aware that you had mental health.
When I was a teenager, I had a lot of anger issues, and I mean, we joke about it now, but there was a situation where I threw a chair at my best friend in French class in year 8. I felt things a lot more than was normal.
Did you get suspended for that?
No, funnily enough. I don't know why, actually. I've never thought of that. Why did I not get suspended?
Did it hit her, the chair?
No.
Oh.
I think, and that's why it's still a joke now. It didn't actually do any damage.
Do you remember what brought that on?
I think she just said something that set me off, and I just had such bad anger. I used to go outside when I'd be having fights with my parents, and there'd be these poles that sort of held up their house, just support poles, and I'd punch them and really hurt my hands just to try to release anger. I don't know. I just needed to get it out. But I didn't realize that that wasn't normal until my parents were kind of probably need to speak to someone about that. So they set me up with a counsellor, and I was in year 8 when that sort of all started. But
so anger management was the first sign of something for you?
That's just the first thing that I remember speaking to anyone about it. But like a lot of kids, I was bullied quite prolifically in primary school. So I ended up having to be sent to a different high school that no one from my primary school went to. A lot of sadness probably started then, but also you're a little kid. So
what were you bullied about?
Probably the last 5 or 6 years, I've always tried to be someone that I'm not and tried to hide the real me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was a loser. I would go to the library and now I just think that, gosh, I hope that I can instill it in my kid that he can just embrace it if he's a massive dork like I was. I loved reading from a very young age. So I actually started kindergarten and was reading short books. So
wow.
Like I could read from a very young age and I loved reading. So we'd go to the library once a week and we were allowed to borrow 12 books a week on our library card. But Mum would have to let me use some of her allowance, like book allowance, because I would read more than 12 books a week. And these are proper novels. Like as a kid, I was a little, but I would take all of these books to school and like stack them on my desk per day. Just weird little things like that then, of course, like
Is it that you wanted people to see what a good reader you are?
They were like a comfort thing. I just loved them so much. No, because it wasn't cool to read, so it definitely wouldn't have been that.
Yeah, right.
And I was always trying to, instead of just making friends with people that were more like-minded, I was always trying to be friends with the cool kids. So then they sort of like were like, well, who's this little weirdo that isn't cool and isn't good at handball or doesn't wear butterfly clips the way that the rest of us do? So that's the sort of thing. It was always like really little things though.
So the anger you spoke to a counsellor about, and then when was the next time that mental health became an issue?
Well, it's just always very ongoing, but it was something quite private, and I don't think that – I mean, this was quite a long time ago now and it wasn't really spoken about.
There was no words for it then, were there?
No, it wasn't really spoken about, or it wasn't really something that I think Mum and Dad just knew that I struggled a lot, but they didn't really know how to deal with it because there wasn't you didn't put kids on medication, you didn't put kids in regular psychology sessions.
Well, not many kids went to see a counsellor.
No.
So that did that make you feel weirder or did you find it helpful or both?
I'd say both. Actually, a lot of kids at our school did. Well, I knew a couple of others, but it wasn't – I can't really remember caring that much about it. Then when I think it was the first summer that I came back from uni that Mum and Dad were like, we need to sort this out. So that's when they sent me to see a psychologist and a psychiatrist and I first got popped on medication. I've got a really good memory when it comes to some stuff, but there's not anything specific there that makes me think of why they did that. But that's when I first went on medication, so when I was 19.
What did you go on medication for?
Depression initially.
Had it got really bad?
Yes, actually it had, because in my first year of uni, I know that you would find this hard to believe and a lot of people that know me now would, but I was so shy when I was younger and still really struggling to, I guess, be my true self. That sounds really lame. And so I didn't make any friends. I lived on campus at uni and I just didn't really have any friends. I had a boyfriend and I had my nanny. So I'd spent all my time with my boyfriend or my nanny in Sydney and that was pretty much it. So I think I was just very lonely.
Your relationship with your nanny, who is not in the way that someone might think a nanny, someone like Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
It was your nana, your grandmother.
Yes.
You've always been close, haven't you?
Yes, always.
What's been the connection between you and her? Because for a 19-year-old girl at uni living on campus, having her best friend as an elderly woman is
a bit
not
odd.
The norm, I would say.
But she was my safe place. So because I was so lonely and sad a lot of the time and I didn't have the friends and I was living on campus and I was probably too young to move to uni, like to move away from home. So she was like my escape. And I would go there on the weekends and I just immediately felt safe and at home and she would just take care of me because I was really immature. I was a very young 18-year-old. You know, she'd cook for me for the week and it was just safe.
What did you do after uni?
Then I started just working in Sydney for a couple of years and then I moved overseas for a short time, but that didn't last long.
What was that experience like?
Lonely, horrible, horrific.
Why did you go?
I went with a boy. Don't ever do that. Anyone listening? I mean, it was fine. I think that if I hadn't done it, I would have looked back and regretted the decision not to go because I would have always wanted it. And it was the right decision for him. He's over there still. He's got a baby now. He's like living his best life over there. But for me, it was I'm so close to my family and friends. I'm just not one of those people that can. And I'm just not strong enough to live away from that support network. And I was so, once again, just so lonely and my mental health got so bad that he sort of said, you need to go back to Australia to sort it out because I didn't have a visa that covered me for healthcare over there. And obviously America is so expensive. So that he was like, when you go home for your friend's wedding, you need to sort out your mental health before you come back. And when I got back, I was just like, I'm not coming back. Sorry.
For someone who hasn't experienced depression, can you describe what it's like?
Debilitating. So you just feel like something is sort of on top of you and that you can't pull yourself out of. One of the reasons I struggled so long to talk about it openly was because on paper, I am so lucky. I'm so privileged. I've got a beautiful life. The only thing that would make me more privileged as if I had a big old schlong between my legs. Like that's literally the only way that I could possibly get any more privileged in life. I've got every opportunity. I've got everything. So for so long, I couldn't really articulate how I felt because I felt too guilty about it. It was funny. It was only recently sent to me like a podcast episode to listen to about how you can be so happy with your life. Like you look at your life and you're like, I've got everything I could possibly need and want, but that doesn't mean that you're happy in your life at that current time. So it's a real big difference. And I thought that just explains how I feel really well. Like I just don't seem to cope with things well and I'm not happy even when I should be. And I think that actually describes depression when you know that you should be happy, you've got everything, but you can't pull yourself out. And when it's really bad, you're in bed and for me, I pull the blankets over my head and I actually can't move. I cannot move. I cannot pull myself out. I can't speak. I can't articulate anything. I can't eat or drink. It's just like you have to force yourself to do anything because you're so deep in this sadness. And even though you're not going to do anything to hurt yourself, you just want it to end for a while. I said to my mum when lockdown first hit, the very first one in 2020, I said, I just want to go to sleep and wake up when this is all over. You don't want to hurt yourself, but you just don't want to feel like that. I feel like I've just explained that terribly.
No, you've explained it so well because I've heard it said that there's the depression that you can feel that's situational, like after someone dies or after a breakup or after, a circumstance. But then there's chemical depression that's not really anchored to a thing. Like you talked about being sad. You weren't sad about an actual specific thing.
No. So I would describe situational depression as grief. So that's when something's happened. Grief can exacerbate depression, of course. So you're always going to feel absolutely rotten when something happens. But the difference between me almost feeling numb, I'm that low and sad, compared to when something terrible happens and I feel that horrible, heartbreaking grief is vastly, vastly different. I would take grief over that, if that makes sense, because it's something that you also know comes and goes. It also, grief means that you love something and that you feel.
Is it a deadening depression?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And when you go through those periods, have you had them at particular periods in your life and how long have they lasted?
Sometimes they can last for just a couple of days. And it's funny, whenever someone asks me how I am, I'm kind of like, well, in a 24-hour period, I could go from being so happy and so excited and the life of the party to under the doona cover not being able to get up. I mean, I can't anymore because I've got a baby, but it can just chop and change so much. But then the longer periods can last for months on end, which I would say is the longest periods were during pregnancy and now postnatal.
And what do you do? Like, what do the people around you do to help you through that? Is it medication? Is it therapy? Is it just time?
A lot of the time it is time. A lot of the time it's time. When I was pregnant and no one could visit me, there were a couple of close friends and family members that would call every few hours because they knew that I was sort of in, we call it my dark place, and they knew that I was in the dark place. They'd just call just to check in, try to cheer me up if they could. Yeah, a lot of the time I sort of go internal with a lot of things and I actually just need to – there's nothing that anyone can do. You have to do it yourself. You have to pull yourself out. And sometimes it takes a long time and you will need medications or you'll need a therapy session, or sometimes it's just like you need a really cold ocean swim or something almost to slap you and help.
Pull you back into your body.
Pull you back into your body, exactly. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that there's anything that anyone can do. Just be there and not push me too much to get up if I can't. When
you met Luke, how did you guys meet?
Tinder.
And something happened on Tinder, didn't it?
Yes.
With you and Luke.
Yes, he sent me a dick pic before. I'm a little bit mortified that I wrote about that because now our child is going to read that article and I'm grown up. And Luke at the time, because I read it to him and I think he was like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But then when it was published, he was like, ah. He was just an idiot. He was such a player.
So what made you go, yeah, I'm still going to go out with you?
Well, I had just moved back from America where I'd gone through this breakup. I was feeling so low and lonely. Like I just moved back to Sydney, started a new job, moved into a new share house. You know, Tinder was pretty new and I'd sort of joined it just for fun, mainly so my girlfriends could use it and swipe away. And then that day, I'd cancelled on every date that I had organised because I was so freaked out. I'd never been on a date before. And
You'd never been on a date
no,
before?
I met my first boyfriend at uni and we just sort of hooked up and then that was it.
And he was the one you went overseas with?
No, he was my first boyfriend for 6-ish years. And then my second boyfriend, we just sort of met at work and one night hooked up and that was it sort of. So I'd never been on a date. And my ex-boyfriend, the one in America, still messaged me that day and he said, I don't want you to hear it from anyone else, but I have got a new girlfriend. And I was kind of, even though I'd known it was over, I was, okay, that's a lot. And my girlfriend that I was with at the time said, okay, I know that this guy's an idiot that you're talking to on Tinder. Like he sent you that gross photo and he's just an idiot. But go out on this date. You need to get back on the horse type thing. And so I went out on the date and I said to my sister and my brother-in-law the next day, I think I'm going to marry that man one day. But I wasn't serious because he was such an idiot, but I just thought he was so attractive. And
What
he made
happened
me
on the
laugh
date?
And we just got pissed and had fun.
Yeah.
He gave me a really good pash, like a couple of minutes in. He goes, I'm going to pash you. And I was like, oh, all right. Then we didn't actually get together for another year and a half. We were just friends.
Even after that pash and the dick pic and everything, you were just friends?
Well, he was a massive player and didn't want to settle down and I'd just been in a relationship. So I wasn't ready to either. I wanted to be single for the first time in my life.
Were you hooking up with each other or just?
Not initially, we were just friends, but then as time went on, we kept hooking up and I think that's when feelings really started to develop for both of us.
How did you end up getting engaged?
From
From dick pic to
engaged.
engaged.
We were traveling around Europe with friends and just on the top of a waterfall in Iceland after I'd been screaming at him all day and throwing several tantrums about everything. Apparently he said to everyone, I don't want to do it. She's in such a bad mood. And they were like, just do it. I'd just thrown a tantrum and refused to get back into the car with him and we were walking up these stairs to get to the top of this waterfall and he said, do you still love me even though I annoy you so much? And I said, yes, still have a really naughty cat. And I was like, I still love Percy even though he's so naughty, idiot. And then I just stormed ahead of him up the hill and he apparently turned around to look at the group like, she's absolutely mad. And then, he just did it up there and it was really nice.
How long had you guys been together by then?
A year and a half.
And you were how old?
28. Yeah, 28.
Were you one of those girls who had dreamt about her wedding?
Yes. Yes, definitely. As I got older, it seemed more and more not a big deal. But when I was younger, I never would have wanted to admit it because I always wanted to not be that girl. But, from movies and that you just imagine your beautiful dream day.
And did it live up to expectations?
Oh, absolutely not. You saw me 2 days later and I was like, I think I was a little bit unhinged from the whole experience.
You didn't love it.
I hated it. Did not enjoy. I can't look at the footage.
What happened?
A lot of different things. There was bushfires, so a lot of it was out of everyone's control. In fact, most of it, so caterers didn't turn up, bar staff didn't turn up, the band didn't turn up. The venue was literally on fire a week before. Some friends couldn't come. I'd broken up with one of my bridesmaids a month or so before. There was just a lot of little things, but it just made the whole experience not great. But at the end of the day, it was just a wedding. But I still don't have great memories or anything of it. People talk about their dream day and I'm like, oh, Christ.
You mentioned breaking up with a bridesmaid. That must have been traumatic.
It was, but hindsight is a funny thing. I had a very high-stress job at the time and I was planning this wedding, which I thought that I didn't need any help for. I think that's one of my biggest lessons in life. I always need more help than I think I do. And when I look back on that, the way that I handled that friendship breakup was so bad. I just blocked the girl and then went on a podcast, wrote an article and national television talking about the friendship breakup without giving her – we'd been friends for 11 years. I should have had a conversation with her.
What did you break up over?
I heard from My Hen's Night. I was watching through videos and I could hear her bitching behind someone about me. But I was just so sensitive clearly at the time because I look back and I thought –
bridesman.
Could I just not have called her?
Yeah.
Being like, you silly mole, why'd you say that? Or
Yeah.
I should have had a conversation.
Have
We've all
you
said things
since?
No. Well, I think I burned every bridge. It was completely my fault. I did not give that poor girl one opportunity to ever speak to me about it until it was, far too late.
When you were younger and you thought about having a baby, how did you imagine motherhood would be?
It was funny. My sister was always the really maternal one. Kids love me. I wouldn't say I particularly like them that much. I like kids that I know and babies that I know, but I'm not one of those people that walks down the street and sees a kid and goes, oh, that's so cute. I'm kind of like, ugh, be quiet, child. I figured that I eventually would want babies or a baby, but I didn't think about it that much. I always just would say to mum and dad, I'm not doing things the way that you did them, because they were very strict.
In what way?
I wasn't allowed to do very much, just had a lot of rules. Weren't allowed to watch different TV shows. We weren't allowed to watch TV in general. On the weekends we could watch a movie. Weren't allowed to eat a lot of foods. I guess normal stuff, but they were quite strict with me because I was the eldest, so I was the test drive child as well.
How many others are there in the family?
2. I've got a younger brother and sister.
And so when you and Luke decided to have kids, did you decide? Was
Yes.
it a difficult decision?
It sounds really bad, but it's something that I just kept putting off because I love partying so much, and you obviously can't do that. I know that sounds terrible, and I'm so selfish, and I love sleep, and I love lazing around in my own time. So it was just something I sort of kept putting off. But we did know that we wanted babies. That was not something that we ever were on the fence about. But then I'd also had a couple of girlfriends that had gone through some fertility issues, and I thought that was always at the back of my mind. So I didn't really want to wait too long. And then at the end of the first lockdown, things weren't looking like they were going to improve that much. And on my birthday, we were sitting at Gordon's Bay drinking a champagne, and we were kind of like, should we just do it? Should we just see? Should we just try? See what happens? But I'd booked in to get my nose done in the following February, so we didn't start trying till after that. And then we were very lucky it happened, I think, the second month that we tried, and now we've got little Lenny Lee.
How was pregnancy?
Oh, fucked. It was a lot harder than not many of my girlfriends had many symptoms. Of course, like a little bit of nausea here and there, but not that bad. I had HG or whatever it's called for the first 16 weeks where you just cannot stop vomiting. And you
The
can't.
Kate Middleton thing.
Yeah. I don't think it was ever that bad because I didn't end up in hospital, but I lost a lot of weight. We were moving house and it was just miserable. And then a lot of like emotional things happened during my pregnancy that wouldn't sound like much, just standalone, but they sort of accumulated. And I think because I was so sick, my moods just got so low, and then we went into lockdown and I just was miserable. Then I got sciatica. Then I was still really sick and I had really bad heartburn. I couldn't really eat that much. And I just sort of got a lot of the symptoms, but quite intensely. And so then I was on different nausea medications and that sort of thing. The last part of it was fine until you get so big that you can barely move and you sort of got to hoist yourself out of bed. But yeah, especially I'd say the first 25 weeks were pretty damn rough. And because we're in lockdown, there was nothing to look forward to. There was nothing to – I was just sitting there. We had no end in sight. Do you remember? It was hell.
In some ways, though, you couldn't miss partying because no one was partying. So it's not like there were things going on.
And I was too sick. I couldn't imagine ever drinking again because I was like –
so sick.
I was so sick. It was honestly like the worst hangover I'd ever had times 10 all day, every day. It was hell. So I couldn't imagine ever drinking again because I was like, why would I ever want to be hungover again? This is horrible.
Were you always going to find out the sex?
Yes, because I wanted a girl. And I was like, well, I need to find out because if it's a boy, I need the rest of the pregnancy to sort of come to terms with. I don't know if that's the right.
Yeah, process
it. Because I didn't want my poor boy, if I was having a boy, to come out and me go, oh, rats, put it back in. So yeah, I always wanted to. And also I don't really like surprises. I'm just wanted to be organised with it. And yeah, I just wanted to know. I found out over the phone. I didn't turn it into a big thing.
You didn't have a reveal party?
No, I mean, everyone is fine to do what they're – but guys, it's 2022. Do we really need to do gender reveals these days?
And yet it meant so much to you though.
I know. But you know why? It's so wild because I just had this vision in my head of what my relationship – I think because I was so close with my niece. She was only less than 1. And I just imagined a little mini-me. Like I was projecting onto her this imaginary baby, and I was projecting this fantasy life that didn't exist and wouldn't have ever happened the way that I'd planned it to anyway, because nothing in life goes to plan. And I was just sure it was a girl. So I felt the feminine energy. I was just so sure. A psychic came up to me because I was also very anxious about miscarrying because I thought, oh, it kind of happened that easily. It can't be that easy to have a baby. So I just was very anxious to begin with that I would miscarry. So, and a psychic did say to me once, she said, don't worry so much. Everything's going to be fine. And it is a girl. And I was like, so I just was sure. So when they told me on the phone it was a boy, I was like, what? Check again. Because I just was shocked and I was really upset.
And they were like, nope, still a penis there.
Yep, there is still a penis there. Yeah.
How did Luke feel about it?
Oh, he was so happy. He didn't care, but then he was just so happy.
Did you feel like there was room for you to be disappointed?
Well, I didn't realize it was a thing because you know what I'm like. I just say things without really thinking about it. And I didn't realize that it was a thing until I spoke about it and said, I'm actually so disappointed that I'm having a boy. And my DMs just blew up with women saying, thank you. I thought I was a weirdo for having gender disappointment. And because one thing that I was so conscious of is that I didn't want anyone that had gone through struggles to get pregnant to read that and go, you stupid bitch. Like, do you know how lucky you are to get pregnant? But the amount of women then that had IVF struggles or lost a baby or that still said, thank you, because I still felt like that, which is so wild because all of us, we're so aware of how fluid gender is and, well, most of us, and it is just the sex organ that we're really looking at. But so many women have an idea of what they want. And even if they don't admit it, they probably do. And then when they're sort of talking to me in their DMs, they're like, I did really want a girl or I did really want a boy. But I didn't realize that it was a thing up until that point. I don't know. I'd never really seen people talk about it.
There's a real sense that you can't talk about it. I have a friend who had 2 boys and was pregnant with her 3rd baby and really wanted a girl. And it was a boy. And I regret how dismissive I was of her, you know, and she's since gone on to have a 4th boy. But I was very sort of scolding and I was quite like, the most important thing is that it's healthy. And it's like, well, that's easy for you to say. I've got a boy and a girl and I have 2 boys and a girl. You know, for her it was real. And I think that anything a woman feels should not be discounted.
Yes,
just because another woman has it worse, you know. So, yeah, I've learned a lot about gender disappointment and how upsetting and distressing it can be.
Yeah, but I think that also it is true. It is a healthy baby and it's a baby. So I think that you didn't mean anything by it, of course. So
how long did it take you to sort of feel okay about it and feel excited about having a baby again?
Probably when he started kicking me and getting little hiccups and that sort of thing. And it's so funny because some people, when they talk to me about gender disappointment, they're like, aren't you afraid that this is on the public record and that he's going to see that you wanted him to be a girl? I'm like, no, I'll chat to him about it. Like, there is no way that kid is ever not going to know how loved he is.
Yeah.
Like, he's the most loved little boy. Like, there's no way that he's going to be like, oh, Mum, you wished that I was a girl. Yeah, I did before I knew you. Towards the end of my pregnant, Luke actually said, because obviously there's the small chance that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Although then once we'd had this conversation, the lady was like, no, that's a big old penis that we can see in the next ultrasound. But he said, well, how would you feel if, you know, they said, oh, we were wrong, it's a girl. And I said, oh, no, he's my little boy. So I completely turned around. And so that's what I always say when people say, how long did it sort of, I'm like, trust me, you're not going to care.
I'm Mia Friedman and you're listening to No Filter with Kelly McCarren.
How was the birth?
A lot harder than I thought it would. I did go in with no expectations though, which was good.
You weren't a birth plan girl?
No, didn't care less. My midwife loved me because she was like, so many people have, you know, laminated birth plans and all of this stuff.
It's good that they're laminated.
Yeah.
When they're flung across the room.
Yeah, and the fluids that go on them. But I just went in and I was kind of like, get the baby out healthily. That's all I care about. I was very anxious towards the end about having the baby, not the birth. Birth never bothered me for some reason.
Really? You weren't scared?
No, I was a silly Billy though. It was horrendous. And everyone says you forget how bad it is. I'm like, well, I don't.
Did you become fixated on other women's birth stories in the lead up?
I'm still obsessed.
Yeah, right.
I'm obsessed. I want to know everyone's birth stories. I want every single juicy detail.
Well, I want to know yours, obviously, because I've never heard it. I'll try to give you the
condensed version because it's a long story. So I'd had a falling out with another girlfriend through my pregnancy. I sound like a brilliant friend. And it was one of the most devastating parts of last year. I'd had a couple of cervical sweeps for a few days, but nothing was moving, and they were worried about the size of the baby because he was measuring huge. He wasn't in the end. They had booked me in for an induction because they were like, there's absolutely no movement. He is safe and secure in there. So the night before I gave birth, so I actually worked on the Friday. I filled in for Key on the Spill. Then I had a huge cry to my mum in the afternoon because I was like, I'm so anxious. I'm so uncomfortable. She goes, we just need to get this baby out.
Yeah.
But I tried everything. I tried the sex. I tried the chilies. I tried absolutely everything.
Were you overdue?
No, but I was so big.
Okay.
Yeah, I was enormous towards the end. It was just very uncomfortable, as everyone would be, especially in the middle of summer. And so I got some text messages from this girlfriend before I went to bed. And when I sort of saw her name, I immediately got, you know, when emotions can really play around with what happens to you physically. So I got so excited because I was like, oh my God, she's messaged me. She probably knows that I'm about to have the baby and she wants to chat, because I'd just been trying to give her space. But it was just a flurry of quite horrific abuse.
Oh.
And this is from someone that I love and still loved, and it just set me off. And I was just in the shower, and because Luke had been so angry through this whole thing, it wasn't the first time she'd sent me abusive messages, and he was like, this is not okay. You need to block her because you can't be receiving this sort of negativity, like it's just stressing you out. Because there'd been a couple of panic attacks throughout the pregnancy, and I had to call the ambulance at one. It was just he was
that's a lot.
He was very concerned about my
protective.
stress levels.
Of course.
And I said, I'm absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine. Just go to bed. I just needed to be by myself to cry because he wasn't letting me cry. And sometimes you just need to. And I know it was because he was trying to protect me, but I needed to cry about it. I got myself so worked up that I went into labor. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't related, but there was no movement. And then I was so stressed and so upset that I got diarrhea, and I had diarrhea for a couple of hours. And then I was like, these don't feel like poo pains anymore. But Luke got up and he goes, are you in labour? And I said, no.
What, you were trying to hide it?
I was, because I didn't want to, I was too anxious and I didn't want to admit it. So I was like, no. And he goes, are you having pains? And I said, yes, but they're poo pains. I've got diarrhea. And he goes, I think you're in labour, Kelly. And I said, absolutely not. And then I just pulled the duvet back over myself and just snuggled down and sort of glared at him. And then he calls my best friend, who always, she had to calm me down on my wedding day. She is the person that can calm me down when he can't. And he's like, can you talk to her and tell her that she's in labour? And then so he's got her on the phone. She's like, babe, I think you're having contractions. But I was like, okay, well, they're not that bad.
Doesn't feel real, does it?
It doesn't. Once again, I wasn't scared about birth. I was scared about being a mum, because so much is focused on being pregnant and birth.
That's sensible of you.
But what about being a mum, bringing a human home and having to keep the human alive? It was terrifying to me. So that's what I was focused on. Anyway, we called the midwife, and the midwife was like, yes, you're in labour. Anyway, so next few hours sort of passed, and it progressively got worse and worse. And then they kept saying, you're too soon, don't come in. They said, don't come in until your contractions are 2 to 3 minutes apart. And Luke's on the phone to them going, they are 2 minutes apart. And he's panicking because his best friend's wife had delivered both of her babies within a couple of hours.
Oh, wow.
She got to hospital both times, and the baby, no time for epidural,
shot
nothing.
them out. Yeah, like
so he was so panicked. He was convinced that I was having this baby on the bathroom floor.
Yeah.
And he's like a bit of a hypochondriac, so he worries about things a lot. I'm like, I'm not having the baby. Like, it's fine. So I was just trying to ride it out because the midwife's like, stay at home. But then the vomiting started from the pain. So the pain got so intense that I started vomiting, which is always a sign that things are bad.
Is that something that happens with you?
When I'm in a lot of pain, yes. Obviously happened a lot through the start of the pregnancy. And then he was like, nah, that's it, we're going. And then it was lucky that we did do that, because we're sort of on the way, and he goes, your contractions are now less than 2 minutes apart, Kelly. Like, this is very – and I sort of always imagine, especially because they'd booked me in for the induction and I'd seen someone else arriving for an induction, that we'd sort of go into – we went to the Royal Women's, which is such a lovely experience, and you'd walk in and you have your overnight bag, and, you know, you'd be looking at each other lovingly like, oh, we're about to meet our baby soon. And instead I'm doubled over, and they're trying to get me to check in because of COVID, and I'm like, my phone's not fucking working. And I'm doubled over just screaming, and the lady's like, oh gosh, go on through. And Luke's like trying to apologize to people because I was mooing like a cat.
Oh, they must have seen some things,
I know
those
that,
people,
yeah,
but
I didn't care.
you were mooing like a
at
cow.
all.
Yeah.
But I always
Yeah.
also thought, because even though I'm very vocal, like I don't make noises so if I'm on a ride and scared, I don't make noise. I don't make noise, like I'm very quiet during sex. Like I'm a very internal person when it's something. So I just imagine that I do labour quietly. Oh, no.
Like a Scientologist.
Oh, no, yeah. Tom Cruise would have been very proud, I thought. But then we go up and I'm on the ground, I'm vomiting.
You're a barnyard animal.
I was like an ape on heat.
Wow.
It was a mess. And then she does the internal. Luke was traumatised after witnessing that. He goes, they didn't warn you or anything. They just shoved their hand straight up there. The look on his face, he's just horrified. She said, oh, you're only like 2 centimetres dilated or 1 centimetre dilated or something. You're not even in active stages of labour. And I'm, what?
What no one wants to hear.
What? Because some of my girlfriends didn't have epidurals and they were like, yeah, it's fine. It's not that bad. Or everyone's so different. They experience labour so differently. But for me, my contractions, I've never felt anything like it. And I laboured very strangely. I mean, there's no not strange way to labour, but I was on my side and I had one arm and leg in the air and I was kind of like having a fit. It would have looked like I was vibrating and sort of just making this like really guttural, kind of like I have night terrors, so kind of like that. And they kept putting off the epidural because they were like, you're not in active labour yet. I'm like, give me the drugs. And they couldn't give me the gas because I was vomiting from the pain and it makes you more nauseous. Anyway, I ended up getting an epidural and I've never been so still in my life. And my contractions at that point are 60 seconds apart and lasting for 60 seconds. So they gave me the epidural and
How many hours had you been labouring for?
Not that, like 8.
That's a long time.
Well, it's a long time given my contractions were very close together. But in the scheme of labour, like some people, one of my girlfriends, she was in labour technically for 4 days, but it wasn't fast contractions. So she said it wasn't that bad. But his heart rate kept dropping. So I'd be like sort of dozing and because I hadn't slept obviously the night before because I'd been so upset and so stressed and I'd had diarrhea. And then they'd all rush in and they'd sort of turn me on my stomach and start slapping my tummy and shoving stuff up my vagina to test things.
How often would this happen?
It happened maybe 2 or 3 times before. Oh, and they'd also given me induction drugs to speed it along and broken my waters and he'd pooed in me. But they were like, it's fine. He's just stressed. My back started spasming because of the way I'd been labouring above the epidural. And so then I started vomiting from the pain again. And then Lenny, his heart was down for 6 minutes and they said, if we can't get it up in the next 2 minutes, we're going to take you for a emergency C. And it hadn't been discussed with me before that. So I was a bit like, oh, gosh, we've just gone from 0 to 100. Like the lights had been off. It had sort of like I thought everything was fine. And the midwife kept saying, don't worry until I worry. And then they couldn't get it up and they raced me and they put the spinal block in. They're suiting Luke up. I think that they have to ask. The obstetrician said, okay, so you're actually 10 centimetres now and his heart rate's fine. Should we just stop everything and you can go back to your room and in a few hours you can try to deliver naturally? And I was like, no. Get him out. At this point, I was just so stressed. I kept thinking that something was really wrong and I just wanted him out so I could see that he was healthy. I think that they have to ask so that you're consenting consistently. Anyway, and then they said, okay, well, in a couple of minutes, you're going to meet your baby. And then they pulled him out. And I should have realised that something was a little bit wrong at that point. Was because even with the C-section photos and emergency C-section photos I'd seen, you still got the baby on your chest and you got a little photo with your husband and everything. But they literally pulled him out and they had the curtain down and they pulled him out, held him above the curtain, and then they just took him. And they put the curtain back up and it was honestly like something out of a horror movie and I hate blood. And I just saw like all this blood go over the curtain in front of me and I –
like spray on the curtain.
Thick spray. And I just was, yuck. It was, and I thought this is not good. And I was shaking and vibrating so much because I had so much adrenaline in me and I had so many drugs in my system at that point. But I just went internal at that point. I just did my internal thing. So I ended up losing half my blood. I went septic.
What happened?
I don't know. They said that they don't know.
Just a thing.
Just one of those things. Yeah.
And how was Luke while all of this was happening?
Oh, he was calling my family. He thought I was dying. He's very dramatic, but I was always in very safe hands. and he wasn't with Lenny, which I thought, but apparently he was just so panicked and upset that he was sort of just trawling the hospital corridors, like calling people, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. And no one told him because they were all just trying to help me. And then I was in recovery for about 6 hours before I got taken up to acute care. So I didn't get to meet him for 6 hours. And so that sort of really, when I think back now, and I know it's silly, but the abandonment that poor baby would have felt, to have been so snug and felt my heartbeat and been like so safe and warm, to then be ripped from me, all these people around, bright lights, no food, and then just be stuck in like a little incubator, and bloody Luke wasn't even with him. And then it was 6 hours till he was like reconnected with me. I just think that, you know.
Were they worried about him, or they got him away because they were worried about you?
They were worried about me. He was fine. He was in that little a lot of C-section babies, because they're not pushed out of the vagina, their lungs aren't, they've still got lots of gunk in them. So they put him on this thing for a little bit, but he was absolutely fine. And then I was on fentanyl for 3 days for my pain, and yeah, it was not good.
What's fentanyl and how does that work? What does that do to you?
Fentanyl is the strongest painkiller. It's like 100 times stronger than heroin or something wild. It's locked in a little case in the hospital while it's hooked up to you, because it's so, yeah. To looking back, I'm like, it's so wild that they say don't even have one glass of champagne while you're pregnant. And then they hook me up to, and I was also on morphine and endone. So I'm on a cocktail of heavy painkillers, and they're milking me for my baby. It's just crazy.
Had you been out, like unconscious through all of this, and then you came to, or you were conscious through this whole thing?
Through the whole thing.
Were you scared, or you were just in shock?
I think I was just in shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really remember being scared.
And then what about the first time you met him?
I was just in too much agony. It's not an overly – I was crying. I was happy to see him, but I was just in too much pain, and they were trying to get my nipple in his mouth, and in the end Luke just had to intervene and be like, can we try this again tomorrow? Look at her. Like they haven't got her pain. Because they said if we can't get your pain under control, we're going to have to take you back into theatre and clear you out more, because you're obviously still bleeding a lot. Like it wasn't a beautiful experience the way that people say. It was just like, oh, hello, you.
What was hurting?
My whole body was hurting from labouring because I'd been vibrating, but
So your muscles were.
Muscles, sorry, yeah. And all the vomiting, you know how your body always hurts after vomiting? Just, I guess, all my womb area.
Did they tell you what had gone on inside, or?
They just didn't really know.
You just lost a lot of blood?
Yeah. Unless they did tell me and I don't recall, but I'm pretty sure, like my doctor hasn't ever said anything either, so.
What was your memory of your time in hospital after that?
Fine. I loved acute care.
Did you?
Oh, my God. They are so lovely. I mean, I was in so much pain and I was bedridden, so I couldn't actually get out of bed because I had the cannula and catheter in. They took such good care of me. It was when I went down to the maternity ward that I was like, oh, if this is how everyone else gets treated. Like I said to Luke, can you go get me some bottles of water? And he went out, and then he comes back in and he goes, they only give you 1 bottle of water per day down here. I'm like up there, they took the baby at nighttime so I could
where
sleep.
Where are all my nurses?
Where are my nurses? I had a nurse always with me pretty much up there. So I was just so spoiled. And then to get down to maternity, and it was so noisy. And Lenny, he was just drugged. So that's why he was so chill. The only night that we're in maternity, he and I turned to look at each other at one point like, what is all of this noise? Why are these babies screaming? Oh, it's so noisy down here. And then the next day they said, do you want to stay or go home? And we were like, go home. That was not good. So, yeah, I had a great time in hospital considering, but I got taken really good care of.
It's sometimes romanticised, as you say, that moment that you first see your baby and what will it be. Can you describe even just those first few days?
They're very red.
Was it like falling in love? Was it slow? Was it just, what are you?
I always loved him. I think you fall more and more in love every single day as you get to know them more. And he was so difficult, especially early on, that I just didn't know what I'd done or what I'd done to stuff him up so much, because he was just such a miserable, unhappy baby. When I first saw him, I thought, oh gosh, you're covered in gunk and very pink. And I just wanted to hear the cry because it had been – and as soon as I heard him cry, I was like, okay. And I also said, oh, he's very fat because he was swollen from being in distress, but he wasn't actually that fat in the end. I'd say it's just like you love them, but you fall in love with them slowly, and you don't particularly like them all the time.
Speak about that.
Well, he screams. All babies scream, but I knew something was wrong a couple of weeks in because he would scream for 9-10 hours a day. And so anything more than 3 is considered, go to the doctor. Obviously throughout the day, not just 3 hours nonstop, although Lenny has done that. But yeah, so 9 or 10 hours. And my parents, because my husband was doing renovations because we had to move, so he wasn't there to help. So I spent a lot of time with my parents and they were like, this is not right. Like, of course, babies cry, and that's what I always need to reiterate to people. Babies cry. I'm very aware that babies cry because some people are like, didn't you know that it would be hard? Of course I knew it would be hard, but babies do sleep, well, they're supposed to, and they don't cry for 10 hours a day and scream in agony type. His whole body would go rigid and he'd just be screaming in agony. And once you've gone through the list of diaper change, food, overtired, cuddle, affection, stimulation, whatever you've gone through, if they're still screaming like something's wrong. He also didn't sleep. There were nights where I'd get 15 minutes, if that, of sleep for days on end. And I just was turning into a shell of a human. I was just always crying. And it's really lonely at 4 a.m. And you know that you're not the only one, but it's just so lonely and there's no one else with you. It'd be nice if someone just sat with you for a chat while you're doing it. Because, it's just horrible if you can't put your baby down as well. Even if they sleep by themselves for, I think, an hour would have been nice. But he wouldn't sleep unless he was on top of me. And he's still like that a little bit, but it's gotten better.
How did you and Luke negotiate who would do what?
Well, because he was doing these renovations, I got stuck doing everything. So I really resented him and it was a very bad few months on our relationship. I threatened to leave him several times. I looked at places, rentals in Double Bay. I was like, we're leaving you. Lee Campbell told me, she said, expect to want to divorce your husband several times within the first year. So that was always at the back of my mind. I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah.
Now we split things a lot more because I'm not breastfeeding as well because it was making him sick. So we split things a lot more evenly and because we're both working as well. So it's not fair for me to be doing all the night feeds and all of the settling. However, he's very manipulative. The baby, not Luke. Well, both actually. Luke says that he looks around now when he's crying, waiting, because he knows that I will come running. And I'm the only one that he will settle for sometimes. And it's exhausting. Everyone says, oh, that's so cute. It's exhausting. And then Luke will want a bit of affection. And I'm like, can you get off me? I've had someone on me all day. It's exhausting.
I've heard the term skin hunger for when you just want affection or cuddles, but the opposite is in those early days where it's like, can I just have 5 minutes with nobody touching me?
Yes. And 5 minutes without hearing the sound of your baby screaming hurts everything. So to be in the shower and hear your baby screaming, or you finally get your baby down, and one night over Easter, everyone else had gone home because Lenny had ruined Easter for everyone just by screaming consistently for a few days, and then I was just crying for a few days. And he wouldn't let anyone else hold him all day except for me, and he just screamed all day on and off except for like little 10, 20-minute bursts of sleep. And I finally got him down, and it took over an hour to get him down. And I went and my mum poured me a glass of wine, and then I just hear him in the room just go, "Ah," and I just lost it. I just broke down and I could not stop crying. I was like, I'm never going to be myself again. I'm never going to not have a miserable baby. Like, what on earth I don't know what to do. And Mum said to me the next day, she said, you know how you feel when he cries? Me and your dad felt like that last night when you were crying, like it, just so you know, it never ends. And I was like, gee, thanks. Thanks for making me feel anxious about that. It never ends. I'm 33.
Because your baby crying sounds like failure, doesn't it? In a way.
Yeah. And the whole –
you feel responsible.
I felt a bit smug about motherhood because I honestly thought that I'd be really good at it. And I mean –
before it happened.
Yeah.
But I think we all do.
Like,
I think everybody
honestly
does.
Was kind of like, I'm really good with babies and children, and so many in my life, I know what to do. It'll be fine. I think that I'm a good mum now, but in the depths of postpartum depression and those first few months, I just spent a lot of time just texting Luke worrying messages saying, I can't do this. Everyone would be better off without me. And I just felt like I was failing him and that he deserved so much better as a mother, which I don't think that anymore. Sometimes I still get bad thoughts, but I just thought this kid is so perfect and so beautiful, because that's the thing as well. When you've got a difficult baby, you don't want other people to think he's difficult, and I wanted to protect him, but I just felt like I was failing him on every part because he was so miserable, and I just wanted him to be happy, and I thought, you're so perfect. I want you to have so much better than me, and it's so unfair that you got lumped with me, and that's just how I felt. Expressing that, I think, can make me sound a little bit like a martyr.
It makes you sound like someone with postnatal.
Yeah.
Were you diagnosed?
Oh, yeah, very quickly. But it was because my depression got so bad last year and anxiety
During the pregnancy?
During my pregnancy, it was always suspected, but I kind of thought, I can't get that much worse. Surely last year the lowest, and then it'd be, lol, what an idiot I was. And then it just was horrible.
But you had people around watching for that, right? And you yourself were watching for it?
Yes, yeah. It wasn't a surprise to me when I was diagnosed, and I knew I didn't want it, but I suspected I probably would.
And also recovering from the trauma of his birth.
Oh, my God. You're sent home. You don't sleep.
Yeah.
You've got a screaming baby, and there's no village anymore. Also, this was January, so COVID was still very scary. I mean, it's still scary now, but you don't want people around your newborn. Like, it's so hard. And I think that there's a lot of people on Facebook. Instagram is a much nicer community, but on Facebook forums you see, oh, it's not that hard. Mums like to say things. And I said to Luke a few weeks in, I said, this is the hardest job I've ever done. And he said, you haven't worked very hard yet that you think that. And I was, no, because it is physical, it is mental, it is emotional, it is horrible in so many ways.
Were people saying those things to you on Facebook?
No, I don't comment on anything on Facebook because I can't deal with.
But people saying it to
other people, and I'm just
people.
like, you horrible person. I think that if you don't, and I've got some friends that think it's the most, they love it and they've loved every aspect of it, and that's beautiful, but respect that not everyone's experience is like that.
What's the treatment for postnatal depression when you still want to breastfeed?
Well, I was medicated the whole way through my pregnancy. The way that it was said to me, they said, we have heroin and ice addicts trying to breastfeed. Like, if we can deal with those babies with those addictions, we can deal with your baby being a little bit addicted to antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. Like, it's okay. We'd rather you be healthy. Because I was on the highest dose of antidepressants, they couldn't do that. Weekly psychology or counsellor sessions, fortnightly psychiatry sessions, and the stage that we're at the moment, because they need to fix my medication, they tried to a few weeks ago and I ended up in hospital because I had such a bad reaction to it. So they actually want to send me to a mum and bub psychiatric unit, which at first I was like, I don't want this to sound offensive, but at first I was like, oh my God, lol, they're sending me to the loony bin. And I immediately went to Girl Interrupted, and I was joking about it, but I was also like, am I that unhinged that they want to send me to a psych ward? But the more I've spoken to people about it, it's not like what you see in the movies. It's a mum and baby unit where you can go to get help.
Yeah.
And
have your baby with you.
Yeah. And to sort my medication out. And I need to get better for him. So that's the next step, so we can really sort my medications out, because they don't want to do it with me being at home, given I do react badly to.
I imagine they want to be somewhere where you're both safe.
Exactly. And because I don't want to do it at home when I've got my baby, in case when I had the bad reaction, I collapsed. So imagine if Luke wasn't there when that had happened. So it's, just too scary to do by yourself, I think.
You mentioned Instagram. You're a prolific content creator. You always have been. It's part of your creativity. It's part of who you are. It's also part of how you earn a living by influencing, along with everything else that you do. How did you make the decision about what content to make around motherhood?
Well, I didn't. That's a good question, but I didn't make any decision I just share everything. Not everything, actually. If it involves other people, I don't. Well, to a certain extent, because it's not my story to tell, or it's not my business to publicly talk about other people's stuff. But I just share and I talk about things, and I guess it's like somewhere where I'm not lonely because I've always got people to chat to. I just like helping, I guess. And so once I start talking about something, if people go, oh my God, thank you for talking about that, then I realize that more people probably do need people talking about different things.
Honestly.
Yeah. Honestly, not like behind these beautiful filters.
Yeah.
And
you know what you were saying before about how you want other people to love your baby even when they're driving you crazy. How did that factor into your decision about what to post? Because the truth of looking after a newborn is that sometimes they are a dickhead or a jerk or awful or all of those things. I mean, they're a baby, but it feels like that. It's not always pretty.
no.
And so they're not always cute. So
He's got terrible baby acne.
Did
he
you
does not
feel
look cute a lot of the time.
protective? How did you sort of reconcile that?
I don't really care what people on the internet think in terms of protecting him. It's more so people when they want to help me looking after him, or that's when I feel protective, because I don't want anyone to ever get frustrated with him or angry with him because it's not his fault. He's a baby.
Oh, you mean in real life?
In real life is
Yeah.
what I should – so in real life, that's when I feel very protective. But, oh, my God, I don't care if people on the internet think he's an arsehole. He is an arsehole. But he's a baby.
He's a baby asshole.
Yeah.
Did you at first think, oh, what if people think I'm awful? What if, before everyone went, oh, thank God?
Oh, I didn't care.
I was going to say, what was the reaction? Was it straight away when you started posting honestly?
Yeah, which really surprised me until I realised actually, yeah, most of the TikTok and Instagram content is really pretty. And I mean, all content is curated, even when it comes across as very organic. My content is still curated because I'm not filming myself 24/7. I'm still choosing to post that. Unless I'm drunk, then it was my alter ego, Alice. She's a very crazy lady. I'm always choosing to still post that. And so I think sometimes organic or relatable content can come across as really contrived, but it's because it's not. Like, that's not relatable. You just happen to, oh, my baby screamed once last night. It's like, no. Well, my baby screamed 9 times last night. It's good that, you're sharing that your baby screamed once, but I think it's that a lot of people were just like, oh my God, my baby did that too. So yeah, the response has been surprising. I didn't realize that it was weird, probably because I didn't think anything about doing it, because I just share stuff. And it's like with the wedding, afterwards people would come out and say, oh, I hated my wedding too. We never said that. You just posted the pretty photos. Like, why do we only ever post the pretty stuff?
Tell me about identity 5 months in.
Oh, I've still haven't found her. It's very hard. I don't know what to wear, which is so why?
In what way?
Like, I recently moved and I threw out 90% of my wardrobe, which I will probably regret. Not throw out, I donated it, gave it to friends, because I just don't know what to wear. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know. Parts of me absolutely loves being a mum and loves hanging out with him, but other parts, I hate being a mum. And I don't think I'm particularly good at it because I'm not very patient. I'm a good mum to him, but I'm not very good at the motherhood thing. Some of my friends with babies, they're like, oh, they'd take their kids to the little classes and love hanging out with them all day. I'm like, it's so boring. You don't do anything. You just sit there and it's like Groundhog Day, the same thing over and over and over again. And I love working so much, but I also didn't take any time off. So that was stupid. But also I sort of needed it for my mental health. So there's just, I don't know who I am. And I think that that's probably really common. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm also pushing myself too much because I'm trying to be all of the Kellys instead of just figuring out who one is as a nice melody, I guess, of all of them.
I think it takes a long time to metabolize this enormous new part of your identity.
Yeah. And because I said to my sister when I was pregnant, will I ever feel like myself again? And she said, no, you'll find a new self. So I guess that just takes time.
How good is she? If you want to follow Kelly's story and see pictures of the very cute Lenny Lee, there's a link to her Instagram in our show notes. But there is something else that Kelly gets asked about a lot. So I wanted to record a bonus episode for Mamamia subscribers about the cosmetic procedures she's done. She's had a boob job, she's had a nose job, and I wanted to ask her if you can even breastfeed after a boob job.
It can be quite difficult for some people, but despite going to budget boobs, he actually did a really, because that's another thing. I've never had any issues with them. They look really good, but I just would never recommend. I just had a good experience.
And it turns out you can. You can listen to that episode right now by following the link in our show notes. This episode of No Filter was produced by Gia Moylan and the executive producer is Liz Ratliff.
If this episode brought up any issues, please reach out to PANDA, Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia, on 1300 726 306 or call Lifeline on 13 11 14.